Yo, 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 yo. What is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today I wanted to talk about Kingdom 65 and all of its current potential, along with some of the challenges, right? I think, when you often hear creators and/or just players in general talk about their kingdoms, typically it's in the best of light or it's in the greatest of light, and that's just not usually always the case. There, in probably most areas, if not arguably all areas, there will always be some opportunities. There will always be areas of development along with things that a kingdom does well, regardless of how many those may be. And so I'm going to kind of take you through what I feel is a good kind of overall grasp from a management perspective and give you a lay of the land along with giving you some updates along the way for certain pieces. So this should hopefully be, again, a good video when it comes to those who enjoy the bigger picture and how a lot of the small things will intertwine and factor into how you can make that big picture what it is. So the first one is I just want to give a general overview of what's happening, right? I always like to kind of start off with this. If we look at the Kaltia region, we, again, have about, I think it's 2.5 days or so, 2.5, less than 3 days until Zone 2 opens. So there's obviously a lot that's going on. Thankfully, we already have some Zone 2 plans that have been provided. I do have to, now that I'm thinking about it, I do have to make a couple channels on the Discord for the specific regions. But we have put out a rough draft of plans for how we would like to see and be able to bring a lot of the alliances into Zone 2. So Kaltia, I think that the hope right now is for DMN and then LG65, TP65, though I think we're still waiting to hear from them. And then if we move over to Sofrostian, excuse me, I got the intense allergies right now, and I'm still dealing with some type of respiratory thing. It's intense. But if we move over to Sofrostia, we got NASTi, and then we have SORP as well, who will be going in. If we go over to Nivola, I think the hope right now is to have NRE, NXN, and then we're moving NWO kind of over from Darlin. So they'll most likely be eventually funneling over here into this area. And then there's IBKY and I think CHRM somewhere over here. So again, hoping that these two might be able to kind of work through Forgotten Lands and get in. I think they've talked about possibly doing a merge. So I'm not sure if that's something that's still in the works or happening. I know it is kind of an ongoing and developing situation. Then we look at Forgotten Lands. Now, Forgotten Lands really for the most part is NAPS, and then there is BBGT. Again, hoping that we'll be able to bring both of those alliances in. A plan already has been put out. I just have to kind of reach out to all the leads and the officers from the non-family alliances so we can get as many of them into the Discord. And that's basically a plan to do today so we can try and logistically communicate all of that for how we'd like to get everyone in and then kind of what paths they'll be taking and behemoth allocation, etc. Sometimes it's just good to kind of plan these things as early as you can, at least with a couple days notice so everyone can be apprised. Then we move over to Zoneland, and we're looking right now, I think it's at NO65 and then NL65 right here in red. So I believe the plan is for them to do a CF drop, most likely near one of the passes. I'm not sure if they mentioned the northern pass or so, but that's something that NO and that group is figuring out the particulars. And then we get over to Burning Lands, and here we're looking at Toon in red, and then also 65CK going into a go room. So again, that's kind of the lay of the land right now. Again, a lot of alliances, I believe, at the moment have been kind of working their way and setting up for Zone 2, kind of despite the fight and the ongoing war that we have, which kind of transitions into the next point, which is kind of the DS1 situation. So to give you guys an idea here of what's going on, and I'll probably upload this maybe a day or two later just for a delay, but you can see at the moment that the DS1 has actually started leaving. So I think part of this is that they probably came to the realization that there is limitations in Darlin for what you can do. And now, again, as I mentioned before, a core part of this group, it could have been 20, 30 members that started out, were from what we did eventually find out from them. They were the top server in a game called TopWar. Now, it's, again, a varied kingdom builder. It is different. It's not what I would consider to kind of be the traditional type kingdom builder. If you're looking at games like Rise of Kingdoms, Lords Mobile, State of Survival, Infinity Kingdom, now Call of Dragons as an example. But we found out that a group of them were coming over from there. And starting off where they were in Darlin, the challenge is, and again, I think this is just one of those things when you're playing the game for the first time, right? They probably didn't know that Darlin is probably the least desired region to start in, just because it does not have a direct level 2 pass going into zone 2. So they're playing, excuse me, I'm trying to limit my coughing, if not at least breathe away if it happens. See, there you go, it's happening again. But as I try not to die. Well, we eventually came, I guess eventually what they did is started moving over to the EXE Alliance. So the EXE shell, a shell is basically just what we call an alliance. And the EXE Alliance is over in Nivola, which again would allow for them to have potential access. However, it does require or would require them to do a CF drop, which is pretty much what we're waiting on right now, is to kind of see where they're doing it. There's really only so many places they can go, so it's not really as though it's a big mystery, right? They're either going to try and do a CF drop somewhere around here, right? Maybe it's going to be here in this area because, you can kind of run along the ridge here and get access. So I think somewhere like here could be a potential opportunity. Might be harder to kind of do it here around this because they'd have to place it here. You also have support that you can get from NXN. And obviously NRE, no matter really where they end up placing it, it's not as though no one's going to try and stop them, right? And then they could also try going on the west side over here. And maybe they find a pocket here around like the Great Creek. Maybe if they want to go here, they try and place somewhere here. The challenge, however, and again, this is a good thing, we talked about this as a group, is trying to remove some of the alliances that are just low power, like they're just basically inactive. So it reduces the shell opportunity for them to access if they were trying to get closer to level 2, to a level 2 pass. So those are some things that I know NXN took some opportunities for. Again, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's opportunities obviously depending, but being able to kind of, the thing is it would almost be difficult for them, just given the current situation, to swap alliances again to try and get access to another shell, right? Like if it was this ALGP, if it was this Ghani, if it was RVS, OMPT, just because you'd be able to see that on the leaderboards. The moment we started seeing people head over to EXE, it was reported probably within 60 seconds of after it happening. We already kind of knew that was most likely going to be the play anyways, because if they didn't do that, they would have either had to try and do another CF drop at one of these passes, or they would have had to try and do a CF drop all the way around here on the eastern side of Darlin, which is very unrealistic because they would have to march all the way. Even if you consider where they are now, right, which is which again, EXE currently does not have any active territory. They basically have to do an a la carte, and that's using a food reference, CF drop somewhere, but all of their players are up here, right? They can't. So no matter where they place it, they are going to have to do a walk, which means they're going to have low replenishment time. Unless they're going to kind of do like the baby C, maybe they do the short CF drop and they'll do something maybe here on the ridge. Maybe they'll do something here. But they're still going to have to flag out. They don't have a lot of territory, so they're going to have limited RSS income, which means they're not going to be able to flag out as fast as they probably think, right? So those are things to factor in. On top of that, with some of the other alliances, flagging out, branching out, like are they going to try and do something that'll reconnect this territory? Again, even though the territory's kind of already been cut off, so there's really some limitations there. Are they going to really go for this far CF drop, which again they basically would have to try and do it during a peak window, really for the best chances. But the fact is that given that everyone in Nivola is on alert and just waiting for that to happen, again, I just think it is going to be challenging. It's not to say that I don't think they would be able to do it, and it's not as though I'm necessarily vouching for it or not. It's just to say that there are difficulties in what they're trying to do based on the limitations from where they started and from what started out as just kind of not knowing a lot of what the game mechanics were up until this point. And even though it seems to be, again, and this is not to indicate that, no one is intellectual, right? I mean, anyone can really grasp game mechanics, if they just take some time to ask questions, do some trial and error testing, you'll figure things out. But from here, again, I mean, like I said, we'll see how things go. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the kind of the general management of big projects, right? This is something that I think is, you don't really see a lot of people that are putting out content that really talk about kind of managing big projects when it comes going into kingdoms. And so, for me, I think one of the important parts is having a good understanding that when you are going into managing a big project, there are a lot of moving pieces. As I said, we came into this kingdom for 65 with 9 alliances, probably almost a little less than 400 confirmed players. That's a lot. We had an alliance in every region. We had 2 in Evola, 2 in Forgotten Lands. But more than that, one of the reasons, maybe a few, but some of the reasons why you would go in with a big project is because and I've talked about this before in other videos, it gives you the opportunity to be flexible across the board. You are able to kind of take advantage of the region locking system that happens in Zone 1. So, in most parts, your recruiting potential is also limited in again, most parts, to the region that you start in, unless people decide that they're just going to have, mass relocation, region relocations using their teleport items. Excuse me. Or if they want to use Resurgence at a later point. We've also ended up kind of figuring out some little tricks here and there on how to kind of move players between regions pretty effectively without having to use Resurgence, even after they've already hit 12 and beyond. So, it is kind of, it's fun. I guess the interesting part is it's almost kind of fun think tanking and just figuring out different ways to kind of approach situations. But then you also have the idea of just managing expectations. You have a lot of players in a large group, and then bearing in mind that when our group came in, there was a lot more players that joined that were not a part of the original project. So it's kind of, almost a responsibility and up to the players that were originally in the project to start with, along with the leaders and the core officer teams there, to try and really provide a sense and or a level of reiteration and information and education when it comes to how this project operates. That's something that you usually don't typically see too often when new players are joining alliances. Like an example of doing something that is really a good due diligence play is the moment that someone new joins your alliance, you either add them to the specific group chats they need to, and then you send them a DM message that says, hey, when you have time, please read our decrees that we have, because it outlines kind of what our project's goals are, how our alliance operates, so that way you can see if this alliance is a good fit for you. And something like that, which can be, again, a couple sentences at most, is good to do. And then you just have those decrees that are pinned that kind of give you a top down of what the project's goals are, what the alliance's goals are, what are kind of the do's and don'ts in the kingdom, and then maybe a mail like on best practices and leveling tips, maybe something on heroes. Right? I mean, there's obviously other things that you can do. And that's something that, we've really tried to put forth a good effort when it comes to educating the average player. I think it's really important that players are given good information and quality information. And there's obviously still some work to do there on our end as well. But if the average player is able to feel as though they are confident, and more so that confidence leads to comfortability, it's more likely that they will be more engaged, more socially active, and even more interested in actually fighting later down the road. But a lot of those things have to be handled in a level of like TLC, right? That tender love and care. Kind of taking the blunt or the curt approach just doesn't really do it for anyone. Or I should say the majority, at least. And then that kind of gets me into my next one, which is there's a lot of different personalities, right? Different ages for players, for people that are in management positions, different backgrounds, different upbringings, different levels of current knowledge, experience, maturity levels, all of those things. And one of the things I'm noticing, and I think it's important to talk about these things to be as transparent as possible, is that when you're having a lot of new players join your alliance that were not originally a part of your core group when you were coming in to a kingdom, it's important, and it's almost more imperative that that information is provided to every single new player that's joining. That's why I mentioned before, when someone joins, you should be always DMing them and kind of giving them an introduction saying, hi, welcome to the Alliance. It should be, hey, here's some things that you want to go and read so you can be aware. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me as a lead, and or if it's an officer messaging, you can reach out to me, another officer, or a leader. And that should kind of be standard practice across the board. Something that I'm hoping be able to get a mail out or an announcement out about that as well. Because to be fair, a lot of really what I've been doing is just honestly playing catch up, problem solving, being a therapist, if you will, for people at times, being customer service, tech support. That's really what it is when you're kind of being a leader and or someone who's managing a project. And the importance of being able to recognize that that is a reality and it's not a bad or necessarily a good thing, depending on how you view it. It just kind of is what it is, will help a lot more when it comes to the mental sanity of the average player. We also have situations in our project where, to be frank, there's people that have been a part of our core group for a while, and something like soft skills is something I don't want to say I wish, but I hope that people try to understand the importance of why it is so imperative that we really, it's like that age-old saying, right? It's, if you don't have anything nice to, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, right? Or think before you speak. There are cases where, we have some people that are in leadership. We have some people that are in the management for officers, and then members as well, who I'll see posting in World Chat, or they'll be posting on our Discord, or they'll be in VC. And I think the thing that boggles my mind a little bit is it's not necessarily a level of disrespect, but it's just more so understanding that everyone is here to be here on the same page, right? And no one really is kind of setting out to get anyone. No one's setting out to do something ill-intended. No one's setting out just to be evil, right? But there are these dynamics that factor into how we talk and how we speak to one another. And one of the things I often say to the group is you got to be neutral like Switzerland in how you come across to people, in your tone, in your word choice, in your demeanor, in how you're just speaking to someone in general. Because there are so many instances that can happen and may happen or would happen because of the way that someone speaks to another, and then the repercussions that factor from that. And I'll give you an example that kind of transitions into my next point, which is having good respect for one another and recognizing what those types of repercussions can be. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you a few. So I often get messages on a daily basis from people telling me, well, hey, someone from the management team, whether it's a leader, whether it's an officer, and or even a member, said something to me, or we were in voice, and they just made me feel insignificant. They made me feel as though I didn't know what I was doing, or they were very blunt in their response to me. Or I'll get people that say, hey, I saw a leader post or an officer or a member post in World Chat or an Alliance chat, and it just put me off. Again, I didn't expect that for someone that was in that type of position. And these are just some examples. I've also had situations where, well, I should say we have had situations where, in this kind of war that we've been going on with DS1, which I do think we're in a better position now than when we started. The challenge is you have alliances, for example, like NRE and NXN and NWO, who've pretty much been on the front lines of the war since it started. And once we figured out how to start sending players over to these areas, because we had to really figure that out first before we could, there was clearly a delay between when we would have loved to have people there versus us figuring it out and then also planning the logistics, having those leads announce that to their members, answer questions, sell it, and then be able to start seeing if there was interest in coming over, which thankfully there was interest in coming over, but probably not as much as you may hope or would expect, for example, to have like 100 people coming from, it just total as an example, like total from the regions that are adjacent and beyond, from Navola and Darlin, and they're just all funneling in. It doesn't mean that there was only 5 or 10. Again, there was, I would say, if it's maybe coming from the Calti and the Safrasti area could maybe be like 20 to 40, give or take, I would estimate. And again, that's just from what I've heard. And then from the other side, which is Burning Lands, Zolan, Forgotten Lands, you're probably looking at maybe 30 to 50, 30 to 60. And again, remember, this is an average estimate for people that were working their way over. And we even had some of our big guys. J-Derb, shout out to him. Gosh, I have to look at, sorry, let me look at the boards here so I can give some appropriate shout outs real quick. Because again, he showed up. Our buddy Alpha Deer, for those of you guys who remember him from 2777, very nice guy, good friend. I've had some great conversations with him. J-Derb, I even had a chance to VC with him too as well. Very nice, laid back, down to earth guy. Again, all willing to fight. Hadama, I've actually known Hadama for a while. He's been in a couple of my projects. And again, someone I consider a friend. Very nice gentleman. Ocean 6, I had an opportunity to talk to him a couple times in VC. Very nice guy. These are people that have worked their way over. And again, there's others too as well. Cobras, I think someone new where I've had a chance to talk to him a couple times. But again, my point in saying all of this is that there are players that have came over to assist. And some of the challenges that I think we ended up finding is that between some of the alliances that were on the front lines, there was moments where alliances were just didn't want to necessarily accept anyone new because there was I think a level of fear or just caution when it came to, well, how do I know if this person is applying right from this alliance or from one of the enemy alliances at that point, or in this case someone from DS1. And like those understandably so, those are realistic things that could and can happen. And so when those types of situations come up, it's not really about, hey, I'm not going to accept anyone. It's about how do we problem solve? How do we action that so we can come up with a good solution? And I think one of the ways to do that is where, and this is what we mentioned before, it's, hey, look, if you have someone that's coming over from that region, put their name on a list so that way you can see who's coming over. And then if they apply, you can easily accept them, right? So I put together this spreadsheet. We had all of the alliances ask their players, write their names down for people that are coming over. So that way the alliances like NXN, NRE, and NWO would have a visual list of the people's names that are coming. So when someone applies, all they have to do is check it. If they're on the list, they accept, they're good to go. And then there was times where some of the alliances were just full on capacity and they said, look, we just can't accept anyone else. And so, then that kind of becomes its own new challenge. And so how do we address that? Well, how I addressed it was I told them, I said, look, what you can do, because it's obviously important that you have as many people online as possible when you're fighting, you remove the people that are offline and farthest away from the fight. But before you do that, you send a mail out. You also then DM them if you're going to remove them, and you say, hey, look, we're just temporarily removing so we can get some online people in that can help fight against DS1. And then when you come back online, just let us know, and then we'll get you back in. Because if any of the other, like the idea is you're trying to kind of, again, I'm not trying to go into like a war tactics TED Talk or one-on-one class, but the short version is you're trying to get your online and active fighters as far close to the front lines as you can. And then it's easier for you to remove a player that's already on the front lines and they can go kind of back to join an alliance from another region, from that current region, or one of the other alliances that we mentioned, like NXXN, right, which is a shell or a staging alliance. And so there's a lot of opportunities that you can do. It's just a matter of how do we come together and kind of problem solve those in a very efficient way. And most of the time, it's just a matter of asking. Instead of thinking that, hey, maybe I just don't know how to approach this, and this is the only way that I'm thinking of it right now. And so, we've had a couple of those situations, but people, and again, then eventually, right, if someone comes to me and they ask, or if, someone's presenting a problem, most of the time I feel pretty confident in being able to come up with what I think is a really reasonable and viable solution. And sometimes it's just a matter of talking things through. But in saying all of this, it's to show you that not everything is always peaches and cream, right? It's not always, just going to be plastered as, some amazing experience. Like, it takes a lot of work that we put in to building a project, to building a good, healthy kingdom. Because the idea here is trying to bring as many people as we can to Zone 2. It's always been our objective, trying to keep as many alliances alive as possible. But there's also other realisms. Like, sometimes again, just to give you one very small example of things that can cause rifts, is new players that are joining an alliance that do not know the rules or the expectations that we have for the people there when it comes to not going around and just attacking farmers, Not going around and just attacking players because you can, or because you want to as an individual. And that's why it's important, kind of circling back to what I was saying before. That's why you have those things pinned in your, or you have those things in your decrease tabs for your alliances, right? And just to give you an example of that, if you zoom in and I click on alliance, or sorry, I have to click on mail. There we go. If I click on mail, you'll see decrease, right? This is that section where you would want to put some. And so the idea behind that is that those are the types of things that you put there. And so that way, when new players join, you can send that. And it's less margin of error that can happen then, where players will kind of go out and do these things, because you're basically going to them in a direct message that they're more likely to see than if it's an alliance mail, or even if it's a Discord announcement, for example, because you're sending them something personal and they're just more likely to respond to that and or at least view it. And then we get to what I think the greatest enemy is in Kingdom 65. Personally, I think the greatest enemy is ourselves. Again, if you look at the boards, and I'm going to point something out here in a moment, but if you look at the boards here for Alliance Power, right, you got DMN, NAPS, now EXE, NAST, Tune, NXN, IBKY, NRA. Again, you have great activity, great power from 1, I would say, to about 12. Maybe 13, because again, BBGT isn't that far off. And then it starts dropping a little bit at 150. But that doesn't mean that any of these alliances are drastically inactive, right? If I click on, as an example, let's click on CHRM. They're 98 of 121, right? So they have some open spots there. There's probably some merge opportunity, BBGT 124, 128, but I don't think all of those are active. And then you kind of get to SORP, right, where it's a little bit closer. So that's why I say you have like 12 really healthy, or I would say very healthy active alliances. And then you have probably 13 to maybe 12, give or take, or 17, I should say, where you kind of have a nice mid-range of activity. And then it just obviously lowers when you go down. But overall, I think the Kingdom is doing really well when you think about those. And I think when you look at power, right, we've heard, like JDerb, Alpha Deer, they're planning to push T5. There's a few other people that we've heard that are planning to push as well. And again, these are things that help when it comes. Alpha Deer is someone who's been with us before in projects. He really, from my conversations with him that I've had, I think he really hoped that things would have gone differently in 2777 when we were there. And it was kind of unfortunate when, I had to kind of step away because of the things that were happening there. And there's a video I did that's on my Discord that kind of really explains everything appropriately. But it's nice when you have people that really believe in something, they really believe in a project, and just on one side of it are willing to invest power to really try and help that goal, that mission, that expectation when it comes to trying to reach that. So I just wanted to say that because I think it's really important, just as this, again, in that one example. The last thing is I just want to talk about the potential of 65. I kind of hinted at that already, but let me actually move to connecting alliance. Yeah, so the other thing is working with other alliances outside of the family and trying to work on those management expectations. So and this is where some of those challenges come in, where if you have players that are constantly hitting farmers and they hit farmers from other non-family alliances, then what do? Well, they're probably going to try and hit you back, or they're going to message your officer, your leaders, and they're going to be disappointed with that they're getting attacked. And those are things that if they keep happening enough, they can cause resentment. Those things can cause people and alliances to just not want to work with you, to not want to have conversations with you, even speak to you at times. And it just causes a lot more challenges than it does actually solving problems or building a relationship. And that is something that, again, is probably a lost art, is being able to build good rapport and have good networking with other alliances that are there. And so from that stance, like I said, again, and I'm only really covering things at a very small face value level. There's a lot that really goes in to management and why things happen the way they do. And so I think what I will end with and leave with, because again, I'm pushing almost 30 minutes here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video when it comes to not only showing what I think some of the good things are, but also what I think some of the challenges are. And those are things that, again, I like to work on, and I'm sure some of the others like to work on a daily basis. And it just kind of goes to show you that there's a lot that goes into managing a kingdom. And when you're really trying to create a good, healthy environment for as many players, as many alliances as possible. And I guess lastly, for anyone that's curious, right, which is, I guess, last little special edition or special thing here, which is we have we were in conversations, diplomacy conversations with DS1, and we had provided a proposal of things that we were asking for from the group. And just to kind of give you an example of what some of those things were, which I then have to find the thing here, which is, here we go. So to give you guys an example there, and I'll show you this on screen too as well. So there was something, here we go. And again, just for transparency, because I just think it's important. I'm not going to show anything that they wrote, but I just want to show you guys what we have here. So, oh, that actually didn't do anything. Here we go. One sec. Let's do this. Bam. There we go. So this is something that we wrote as a proposal we sent when we were in conversations with them. I haven't got a response back yet at this time. What I have here is it says, here's our proposal for a ceasefire, and if agreed upon, right, we'll work on continuing to support your alliance to kind of get these things done. One was DS1 can keep their current territory within Darlin, but would need to remove flags in Evola. That's kind of not been done yet, but that was kind of one of the things. NRE would remove all their flags in Darlin and bordering level 1 passes along with their CF. And again, that's something that could still be done. A 1/4 area to start would be provided in Forgotten Lands, though this could increase to 1/3 given the active alliances there, or more as time goes on. And there's a little map down here too as well that I'll show you guys in a sec. And the reason why we did it this way is because that's pretty much what all of our other alliances have. They either have 1/3 or 1/4 splits. Some might have a little bit more, but that's just because those specific regions have developed to a point now where there's been more merges, more assimilations, and or more alliances, or some of the other smaller alliances have just kind of died off activity-wise. And those are things you typically look to assess on kind of a day-to-day basis. DS1 would move to Forgotten Lands, where they would have territory in both regions, also easier access to Zone 2 that does not require them going through one of our alliances and cutting their territory in half, which in this case was NXN, to get to a level 2 pass in Evola. Benefit for both here. And the idea there is that we could actually give them dedicated space and territory, and good territory, in Forgotten Lands, and also an easier path to a level 2 where they don't really have to go through anyone. And then we have a level 2 pass for the first occupation rewards will be theirs. Again, happy to provide. Though if needed to do pass swaps to allow other alliances in, would accommodate just as we would, because we're going to have to probably do some pass swaps with others as well to kind of get them in so they can build their alliance fortresses. A 1/4 area will be provided in Lorcan Zone 2, as we plan to do that for all regions when sharing with other alliances. We have about 4 to 5 alliances that are going into each Zone 2 region, so they're getting the same as everyone else is getting. A 1/9 split of territory in Zone 3 to start, though this could increase for more territory for all, pending the number of active alliances by this time or once in Atherin. So again, presenting that everything's equal across the board, no one's getting more or less than another. Unless something arises, right? We'll kind of address those on a case-by-case. Both sides agree that if any players step out of line and go rogue, attack others without just cause, those players will be spoken with and given one chance, unless they have already have, and then a removal from the alliances where they will not be allowed into any alliances for a set period of time that we agree on. Final step would be a ban or blacklist from Kingdom at that point. So kind of outlining what the expectations are there. Both sides agree to power balancing, where we aim to work on distributing players wanting to use Resurgence, if needed, to the lower active alliances to help build up their power from the bottom. This does not apply for players in your existing region that are interested in joining, right? So in their case, it would be Darlin, and for the others in their affiliated regions that they started in. Both sides agree not to poach players or influence others directly to come and join their side. Players must make a decision of their own volition, meaning their own choice. Both sides agree to power balancing continued. This means that when season resets happen, we will also aim to balance out the active fighting alliances with an even number of strong players so they can be rally leaders, garrison captains, also morale boosts other players in the open field. As the assumption here is that once we get to Zone 3, there will be more mergers that will happen that can also help on the power balancing front, therefore making it easier to know our true fighting capacity for future seasons. So that's kind of what we listed out so far. And this is kind of the map that we provided. This is kind of their territory, right, example that we were planning to give. And again, bearing in mind, this could expand and increase as well. This was more so just a start. So they would have had the 2 behemoths that they already had in Evola, or sorry, in the northwest side of Darlin, plus, 6 to 7 more? 5 to 6 more? Right, so that kind of puts them at, 7 to 8, if I can count correctly? No, this is 7. Yeah, so 8 to 9. I think that was very fair. Again, without having unrealistic expectations that people just need to leave alliances and start power balancing. Like, it's not that at all. It's very detailed in what we provided. But again, from what And again, I don't know because, like I said, I haven't heard anything back. This was last message I sent was on the 26th of April. That was Wednesday, 2 days ago. Almost 2 days ago, I should say, at 1:38 p.m. Eastern Time. It's 10:10 a.m. Eastern Time for me right now as of recording. And I still just haven't heard anything back in that group chat. That's what I was told, that I would hear something back, and I haven't yet. So, again, I think it's important to also recognize that, not everyone is going to have the same level of diplomacy conduct that others will. Well, I shouldn't say level. I should say the same approach that others will. And some people might be more or less versed at diplomacy. Sometimes when someone presents you with a proposal, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily an ultimatum. One of the other things I mentioned as well, a little bit farther down the chat, was a willingness to talk and voice over each of the points to discuss. And that was something I mentioned. Again, basically what I was told in response was, I don't think that they said that they don't believe there's any need to talk about the points or anything. They're going to go and take it back to their group and then get back to me. I think one of the things I always like to do is, and you often hear me say this, is provide a level of due diligence where we're following through, we're exhausting options, and we're putting our best foot forward. So for me, it's giving a proposal, saying, hey, if you guys want to talk about any of these points, I'm happy to talk about it, to have a discussion. Right? Because for me, it's how can we work something out in a way that's going to benefit everyone? And at this time, we've offered them exactly what every other one of our core alliances has and or started with before other factors came into whether or not they could expand what they already had or if there was some adjustments that needed to be made. So there's nothing really that we haven't done. I think the challenge is sometimes when you are playing, and again, I don't know too much about their kingdom in TopWar. I think it's 770. And I think they might, as I mentioned before, I think they said they were the strongest kingdom or server in that game. But sometimes if they're not doing power balancing, it most likely means that this is just in the normal case on average that they are running kind of a mega alliance powered structure, which basically just means that they're letting things kind of organically happen, or they're just funneling everyone into like a top alliance. But again, TopWar could be different than COD. And so, like I said, I don't know all the intricacies, so I can't speak to that. But what I can say is that power balancing isn't really something that is a common thing that a lot of kingdoms honestly probably ever try to do. I remember one time I was scouting migration possibilities for a kingdom that I was in Iraq, and I had reviewed probably about 250 kingdoms that I put on a spreadsheet, and there was only about 3 of those kingdoms that actually were power balancing, like with intent. And I'm talking like they were all like 5 bill, 5.1, 5.2, 4.9 bill, like something like that, where they were all really, really close in power to one another. So again, it's just not really something that's common, but there are a lot of great inherent benefits from doing it that most, if they haven't done it before, are they're just unseen, right? They're unforeseen on those. But I always try to kind of do my best to explain that. Anyways, I'm coming up on 40 minutes here now. So if anything, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Again, hopefully there is a better understanding, if not good information that was provided here so you guys can enjoy this part and aspect of what really goes into managing a kingdom, especially one that has as much potential as K65 does right now. So that's going to do it for me. As always, until next time, I will catch you later.